Chapter 2. Becoming a Ghost. In my own story. After my grandparents died, Grandpa in June as 6th grade ended, Grandma that December when I was in 7th grade, the house grew colder, not in temperature, but in spirit. The small sense of safety I'd known vanished, and in its place was silence, mine. By junior high, I was no longer just a shy boy. I had become a ghost in my own story. I sat in classrooms for years without speaking, not once. I learned to disappear so well that I even convinced myself I had chosen it, but I hadn't. What I had chosen, without knowing, was survival, because silence was safer than wanting, and wanting something, friendship, affection, love, meant risking the confirmation that I didn't matter. The violence behind the ghost. My silence at school had roots in the violence at home. Kathy, my mother, would punch, slap, kick, push, and throw things at me when she lost her temper. Her rage was a physical force that somehow didn't leave obvious bruises that would have gained the attention of our extended family. The emotional deprivation combined with my mother's physical assaults created a perfect storm of social anxiety that would follow me for years. I made a vow in the quiet of my childhood bedroom. I will never become like them. I will never lose my temper. I will never let anyone feel unsafe because of me. I would spend my whole life keeping that promise, even when it meant swallowing my own pain. I spent my time trying to predict whether there was a pattern when my mother would lose control and become violent. Was it PMS? Remember, it was strange that as an early teenager I was having to think about things like this. I had wanted to be removed from this family and placed in foster care. I wanted out. I wanted to escape. Selective mutism and dissociation. By the time I reached junior high, Paul and I were in different classes. That wouldn't have been a problem if I had found new friends, but I didn't. Instead, I disappeared. I became the quiet one, the one who sat in the front, and yet, unlike on TV shows, the teacher never called on me. I was the one who never spoke, never raised their hand, never laughed too loud. By the time I reached high school, silence had become a part of me. I didn't think about why. It just was. I sat through class without uttering a word. At first I wanted to speak, but the longer I stayed silent, the more impossible it became. If I spoke now, after months of silence, would everyone turn to stare? Would my voice crack? Would I forget how to form words? I was good at dissociating without intending to do so. I just entered my own world. I observed the lessons, and even excelled, getting all A's. My grades brought some awkward attention to me, attention I both craved and feared. I didn't call it anxiety then. I didn't have sweaty palms or a racing heart, or rather I wasn't aware of them. I lacked what I would later understand as somatic awareness, the ability to notice where I felt discomfort physically in my body. The dissociation that protected me from the chaos at home also disconnected me from my own physical sensations. I just didn't speak. Years later, as a mental health professional, I would come across the term selective mutism, a condition where a person, despite having the ability to speak, finds themselves unable to in certain situations. That was me. But at the time, all I knew was that I was invisible. I didn't want to be invisible, but by hiding through not speaking, a part of me was making me invisible. Academic betrayal. Academically, I soared from an early age. During elementary school, we had a semi-self-paced program. We would take a test, and if we did well, we moved on to the next higher level. Another boy and I had gone further than anyone previously by just passing tests and moving on. Was I looking for acknowledgement, approval, recognition from my father, who was an engineer? Engineering is a field dominated by math. However, my parents encouraged me to join the band to be more well-rounded. It was a decision made for my future, not for me. But even that small change caused problems. Band practice conflicted with my math class, and I was too quiet to ask if I had missed any tests. No one told me, no one asked, no one noticed. When I got my first semester grades in junior high, my stomach dropped, D+. That was based on 2 out of 4 tests, where my score was 0 on the tests I missed. My teacher could have recommended me for advanced math the next year, but she didn't, probably because of my grades that first semester. Why did I even worry about being in band in 7th grade? I wasn't good at playing an instrument. There was something at school where I couldn't excel, and that was playing an instrument and being in the band. As for being in the band, I felt obligated to participate, to be well-rounded, so a great college would accept me. Before I was even a teenager, I was doing something for my future that I hated. I wasn't on anyone's radar. I wasn't causing trouble. I was just there, or maybe I wasn't. The lifeline of extended family. My cousins entered our lives around the same time my grandparents died. Suddenly, I had a family that I had not had before. For years, my mother and her sister did not speak to one another. I never understood why. Aunt Maureen was 8 years older than my mother and had 3 daughters, all of whom were adults when we were still kids. This was so immensely meaningful to me. It might have been the most valuable experience of my life growing up. Barbara and Dan were about the same age as my sister, Carrie, and me. I loved family gatherings because I got to see them. I liked my cousins, loved them. Admittedly, it was an immature love. Because of my mother's jealousy, I was told, by her all kinds of reasons, why my cousins didn't actually like me or enjoy spending time with me as much as I had thought. This left a lasting impact on me. The stark isolation that had left even my sister distant was suddenly broken by the warmth of my cousins and aunt. I craved human contact with an intensity that bordered on desperation, and even the slightest gestures, a hug from Aunt Maureen, Karen, Sharon, Linda, or Barbara, filled that cavernous void within, feeding my hunger for connection in ways I could barely articulate. At every family gathering, I was thrust into the role of entertainer for my younger cousins, who demanded supervision if they were to wander off to the park down the street or venture into the woods to climb trees. I had to be there. In those charged moments, every laugh and every small adventure ignited a fierce yearning within me. I was beginning to understand a burning truth. I wanted to be a parent well before adulthood, when such things would be possible. With every tiny life I looked after, I felt an almost desperate surge of being needed, of being significant, of finally being seen. The complexity of connection. What truly consumed me was the time I spent with Barbara. We would simply be together, wandering the fluorescent halls of the mall or just lingering in the sanctuary of her downstairs bedroom. There, as she prepared herself, dabbing on makeup, I would sit silently, yearning for the quiet validation that came from merely sharing the same space. Deep down, an undercurrent of anxious shame stirred, a twisted fear that someone might misconstrue my longing for validation as something else, something forbidden. She was very pretty, and though I sometimes wondered if my feelings were misread, the truth was far simpler. She saw me, she acknowledged me, and for a moment I could believe I mattered, yet the bitter taste of validation was always accompanied by the sting of neglect. When Barbara canceled plans, perhaps to be with someone else, someone not bound by familial ties, the cold, cutting voice of my mother echoed in my mind. They have their own lives. The fact is that Barbara was starting to get into boys, and it's not surprising that she was noticed by guys. I could have used comfort and an explanation of these things, help to not take it personally, or to think of Barbara as shallow and just blowing me off, as we would say. Looking back, I can't believe I shared anything like this with my mother. It just opened me up to embarrassment and unnecessary anger at Barbara. I needed to be told that it didn't mean my cousin didn't actually enjoy spending time with me. And then there was that haunting moment when my mother, tangled in jealousy and bitterness, suggested that I was naive to expect refuge from my cousins. "Do you think they're going to let you live with them?" She snapped, her words dripping with disdain. In that moment, a brutal reality cut through me. I was stranded in a barren wilderness with no sanctuary for the wounded parts of my inner and true self. I wasn't wanted, yet a part of me hoped I could still find my way to belonging. At the same time, this illustrates the obvious nature of the lack of closeness, comfort, or any form of connection with my mother and father. It's not surprising that I would prefer to live elsewhere, and my mother was aware of just how distant I felt. It was a situation she created and inescapable, but how could she not be hurt? I wasn't wanted, yet a part of me hoped I could still find my way to belonging. Breaking free from my shell. In the neighborhood and after school, unmistakable signs emerged that I was shattering the confines of my shell. I hurled myself into the whirlwind of sports like kickball, soccer, and hockey, playing in the streets, our yard, or on our driveway. I also embarked on a relentless paper route, delivering newspapers to over 50 houses every single day. The papers were delivered in the morning before anyone woke up, so no interaction with strangers happened. We had a large extended neighborhood. The only parents or adult neighbors that I knew were my next-door neighbors and Paul's parents, so collecting money from customers was a completely new challenge for me, someone who was unable to speak at all in school. To be clear, I could speak one-on-one at lunch and such, but in the full classroom, I was mute. Over time, I noticed that Paul's sisters were attractive to me, yet something about me kept me from even beginning to imagine that kind of scenario as a possibility, that one of his sisters would even consider going on a date with me. Why didn't I ask Paul to discreetly talk his sister into going out with me? The answer obviously reflects my thoughts about myself, my deep-seated belief that I wasn't worth noticing. This connects to what would later consume me about the movie Carrie, my desperate wish that a girl would make the first move, would see something in me that I couldn't see in myself. When I was 16 and had a driver's license, Jack Donlin, the owner of the medical mart who lived right across from us, offered me a job. The job? Delivering supplies to customers in New Britain, a task demanding that I approach total and complete strangers throughout the nearby town. Sometimes I accompanied someone else or was accompanied by a coworker, yet many times I had to make deliveries on my own. Thus, there existed vibrant exceptions in my life that defied the confines of my proverbial shell. I could emerge from my ghost-like existence in certain safe spaces, the neighborhood, the paper route, working for the medical mart. But at school, I remained invisible and silent. Boy doesn't meet girl. By the time high school rolled around, I had long accepted that I wasn't one of the guys who got notice. The idea of dating was so far removed from my reality that I didn't even consider it, but I did watch movies. One movie in particular haunted me, Carrie. I watched it repeatedly, but I always halted just before the notorious prom scene, before the blood spilled, before the terror erupted, because to me, it wasn't a horror film, it was a vision. Carrie was my mirror. She was silent. She was invisible. She was abused, not only by her peers, but by her own mother, though in my case, my peers never abused me. I was just invisible. My own mother had been venomous in ways that instilled a deep, corrosive shame that gnawed at the very essence of my being. And then Tommy saw her. This emerged as a favor for his girlfriend, Sue, who felt guilty about hurting Carrie and participating in taunting her. Yet, something unexpected happened. Tommy wasn't just doing this as a favor for his girlfriend. Once he agreed to do this, everything changed in the story. Carrie was cautiously enthusiastic about the idea after she agreed to go. When Carrie does ask why, Tommy's answer is genuine. We are here and we are together. I wanted that. Not the prom, necessarily, and definitely not the supernatural revenge, but I wanted to be seen. I wanted someone to look at me the way Tommy looked at Carrie, like I mattered. In that dream, there would be a girl who filled a role like Tommy did for Carrie. I could totally relate to the embarrassment that I felt or would feel about dancing. And Carrie must have stepped on his foot. And she starts talking about how she can't dance, can't. It moves from Tommy reassuring her, saying, "It's okay." And then they are kissing with Tommy moving slowly, and then they are kissing. Wow. The long shadow of shame has followed me at times to this day. Is it only in fiction that those things that make one attractive can become unimportant in the eyes of another? I also wanted to be held close in the warm arms of someone, just like Tommy did for Carrie when they were on the dance floor. I would have felt so profoundly uncomfortable on any dance floor because I had never had anyone wrap their arms around me and hold me, then look at me and kiss me. This very thought made my heart race with equal parts longing and terror. I was not bullied in school. No one stuffed me in lockers or tripped me in the hall. I wasn't tormented. I was just ignored. But even that stung like salt in an invisible wound. I didn't go to prom. I didn't go to parties. I didn't go out on dates. I watched from the sidelines as other people lived those moments, and I remained a ghost. They knew how to talk to people. They knew how to ask a girl out without their voice catching in their throat. They knew how to dance without feeling like every eye in the room was watching, judging. For me, that wasn't an option. I couldn't even raise my hand in class. How could I approach someone and ask them to spend time with me? Even the kids who were teased more than I was, had girlfriends, even they had found someone who saw them. I waited. Maybe someone like Tommy would come along. A girl who saw something in me that others didn't. A girl who would notice me first. That didn't happen. Maybe I had a phobia of rejection. Maybe the pre-verbal script I followed, unconsciously, held me back. I would have to wait until college to figure this out. And so high school passed, and I left it the same way I entered, unnoticed. For some, high school is where they meet their first love. For me, it was where I realized I was invisible.